The next major revolution came in the mid to late 1990s, which saw the rise of 3D computer graphics and optical discs in 5th generation consoles. The implications for RPGs were enormous: longer, more involved quests, better audio, and full motion video. This was clearly demonstrated in 1997 by the phenomenal success of Final Fantasy VII, which is considered one of the most influential games of all time, akin to that of Star Wars in the movie industry. With a record-breaking production budget of around $55 million, the ambitious scope of Final Fantasy VII raised the possibilities for the genre, with its more expansive world to explore, much longer quests, more side quests, dozens of minigames, and much higher production values. It included innovations such as the use of 3D characters on pre-rendered backgrounds, battles viewed from multiple different angles rather than a single one, and for the first time, full-motion computer-generated video seamlessly blended into the gameplay. The extensive use of cinematics has since become one of the genre's trademarks. Gameplay innovations include the materia system, which allowed a considerable amount of customization and flexibility through materia that can be combined in many different ways and exchanged between characters at any time. And the limit breaks, special attacks that can be performed after a character's limit meter fills up by taking hits from opponents. Final Fantasy VII continues to be listed among the best games of all time for its highly polished gameplay, lavish production, well-developed characters, intricate storyline, and an emotionally engaging narrative that is much darker and sophisticated than most other RPGs. The game's storytelling and character development was considered a major narrative jump forward for video games and was often compared to films and novels at the time. The explosion of Final Fantasy VII's sales and the ascendance of the PlayStation represented the dawning of a new era of RPGs. Backed by a clever multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, Final Fantasy VII brought the first taste of Japanese RPGs to a much wider audience and played a key role in the success of the PlayStation gaming console. Following the success of Final Fantasy VII, console RPGs, previously a niche genre outside Japan, skyrocketed in popularity across the world. Final Fantasy VII was also responsible not only for popularizing Japanese RPGs outside Japan, but its high production budget played a key role in the rising costs of video game development in general, and it led to Square's foray into films with Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Quintet's 1997 release, The Granstream Saga, was an early fully 3D action RPG that had a unique third-person one-on-one combat system and a storyline that, while being mostly linear, offered a difficult moral choice toward the ends of the game regarding which of the two characters to save, each leading to a different ending. Lance Stalker's 1997 spiritual successor, Alundra, featured a silent protagonist, is considered one of the finest examples of action RPG gaming, combining platforming elements and challenging puzzles with an innovative storyline revolving around entering people's dreams and dealing with mature themes. Upon release, Alundra earned unanimous critical acclaim. It was praised for its well-written story and characterization, smooth game mechanics and platforming, challenging gameplay and puzzles, and expansive overworld exploration. Retrospective reception has since been more positive towards its 2D art design and considers the game to be a classic of its genre. In 1997, a new internet fad began, influenced by the popularization of console RPGs. A large group of young programmers and aficionados began creating and sharing independent console RPG games, emulating the gameplay and style of the older Super NES and Genesis games. The majority of such games owe their achievement to simplistic software development kits, such as the Japanese RPG Maker series. In 1998, we stumble upon my favorite JRPG of all time, Square's Xenogears. It was acclaimed for the ambitious scope of its storyline, which spans millennia and explored themes rarely dealt with in video games, including topics such as religion and the origin of mankind, and social commentary dealing with racism, poverty, war and human psychology, along with narrative references to the philosophies of Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche. It is today considered one of the greatest examples of video game storytelling. Xenogears combined traditional role-playing video game structures, such as Square's signature active time battle system, with new features particular to the game's martial arts combat style. It featured two slightly different battle systems. In the first, the user controlled human characters in turn-based combat, manipulated through the sequencing of learned combos. The second, making use of gears, huge mechas, introduced different sets of statistics and abilities for each character. Xenogears featured both traditional anime and pre-rendered CGI movie clips by Production IG to illustrate important plot points. Though its creators deny it, Xenogears appears to draw a lot of inspiration from the mid-90s anime classic Neon Genesis Evangelion. The game was famous to fans for the infamous Disc 2. After the first CD of the game is completed, the second CD throws the concept of player control out of the window. Instead, the main characters narrate the story in dreary, slow-moving text, only occasionally allowing the player to explore a dungeon or fight a battle. If nothing else, Disc 2 shows how much background story was written into the world of Xenogears, even if it couldn't be squeezed into a single game. All one has to do is look at Xenogears' Perfect Works, a 300-page behemoth of a guide released in Japan, featuring all the backstory of the game in a full timeline and early character sketches and designs. The Xenogears Disc 2 situation is similar to how the last chapters of Final Fantasy XV are on rails both literally and figuratively, although according to sources, this was not to fit all the lore content of the game, but because the development was restarted and a huge pile of content was trashed. The soundtrack too is one of the high points, consisting of both entrancing world music and powerful orchestrations provided by Yasunori Mitsuda. That year also saw the rise of monster collecting RPGs, which, although originating from Megami Tensei, Dragon Quest V and Robotech, was further advanced and popularized by Pokémon, which featured multiplayer gameplay and was released in North America. Pokémon has since become the best-selling RPG franchise of all time. Konami's Suikoden series focuses on the tragedies of war. This in and of itself is not particularly distinguishing amongst video game plots. Many tactical RPGs, like Nintendo's Fire Emblem and Quest's Tactics Ogre, feature similar tales of political intrigue and backstabbing, evil empires and scrappy rebellions. Suikoden, however, is usually ahead of the curve, giving a more personal concentration on the people behind the fighting. The series' big draw is the ability to recruit up to 108 characters, each unique with their own style, personality and role. Not all of them are fighters, some simply exist to be drafted into your hero's burgeoning castle, allowing you to assemble a loyal community from the ground up. Amongst the 5 main entries of the series, most fans will point to Suikoden II as being the strongest. Suikoden II focuses on 2 young men, the unnamed hero and his friend Joey, who inadvertently end up on separate sides of an escalating war. The 2 formerly best friends end up separately working through the ranks, eventually emerging as the leaders of each faction. It's a compelling take on the brothers fighting brothers archetype, a theme which isn't explored nearly enough in video game literature. One of the most crushing moments occurs when you lead a critical assault on your old friend's empire. The viewpoint cuts to Joey, bidding his wife to escape and start a new life, hoping that she finds safety from your brutal warriors. In short, the Suikoden games triumph primarily because they contain far more mature storytelling than your average video game. The same year also saw the release of The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time, which was considered an action RPG at the time and was poised to shape the action RPG genre for years to come. While it is still considered one of the best games of all time, its status as an action RPG continues to be debated, much like its predecessors. Quite possibly, the biggest innovation Ocarina offered was the utilization of Z targeting, The ability to lock onto a specific enemy in order to focus your blows, regardless of whether you're using a sword or a projectile, with the option of quickly switching between multiple enemies. Many RPG, adventure and action games adopted the mechanic because it served as a simple way to manage multiple enemies. Target locking is so common in games today, if you happen to jump back and tackle Ocarina of Time now, you'll likely end up unimpressed. In 1998, however, it was a technological triumph. Modern gamers, those brought up on fancy high-tech polygonal magic, scoff at Final Fantasy VII's textureless character models and low-res pre-rendered backgrounds, claiming that these are grounds for a remake. Yet the ravages of age have been harsher on Sega's Panzer Dragoon series. While the first two titles were simple arcade-style shooters, they amazed gamers of the mid-90s with a gorgeous game world, drawing equally from the likes of Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaa and the works of French artist Moebius. Panzer Dragoon Saga feels like you're walking through a museum detailing a lost culture that never was, from a forgotten period of humanity's history that has never existed. The only concession is that the world's unique made-up language, dubbed Panzerese by fans, was ditched in favor of Japanese. But since the game was localized without English dubbing, relying instead on subtitles, it still feels foreign to Western gamers, even if it's not in the same manner. The battle system also takes a radical departure from the norm. All battles are fought in mid-air, as you're flying on your dragon. The action takes place in real time, with 3 power bars that charge over the period of a few seconds. At any point you can pause the battle and choose to attack. If you've built up enough power, you can attack multiple enemies or unleash a single, more powerful attack. The enemy's attack patterns offered change multiple times during battle, forcing you to adapt and figure out the optimal positioning, timing, and type of attacks to use. Furthermore, you have precise control over the development of your dragon, determining how fast it is, how powerful its attacks are, and other statistics. In 1999, the cinematic trend set by Final Fantasy VII continued with Final Fantasy VIII, which introduced characters with a proportionately sized human appearance. For Final Fantasy VIII, Hiroyuki Ito designed a battle system based on summonable monsters called Guardian Forces, abbreviated in-game as GF. Assigning or junctioning a GF onto a character allowed the player to use battle commands beyond attack with the main weapon, such as Magic GF to summon the Junction GF and have it perform an action and item. While previous Final Fantasy titles provided each character with a limited pool of magic points that were consumed by each spell, in Final Fantasy VIII, spells are acquired, drawn, either from enemies in battle, draw points distributed throughout the game's environments, or by refining items and cards. Characters can also junction these spells onto their statistics, such as strength, vitality and luck for various bonuses, provided the character has junctioned a Guardian Force. The junction system's flexibility afforded the player a wide range of customization options. The use of summoned creatures for anything other than a single devastating attack during battle was a significant departure for the Final Fantasy series. The junction system also acted as a substitute for armor and accessories used in previous titles to enhance the character's statistics. Moreover, where earlier titles required weapons to be equipped and tailored to the character, each major character in Final Fantasy VIII featured a unique weapon which could be upgraded, affecting its appearance, power and limit break. Also, if you were skilled enough, you could score critical hits in battle, pressing the trigger button just as the control character was attacking an enemy. The game also featured a level scaling system, where the enemies scale in level along with the player's party. Similar level scaling mechanics have been used in a number of later RPGs, including The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, Silverfall, Dragon Age Origins, Fable 2, Fallout 3, and Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. The same year, Square's survival horror RPG Parasite Eve II featured branching storylines and up to 3 different possible endings, while the sci-fi RPG Star Ocean: The Second Story boasted as many as 86 different endings. with each of the possible permutations to these endings numbering in the hundreds, setting a benchmark for the amount of outcomes possible for a video game. Using a relationship system inspired by dating sims, each of the characters in Star Ocean had friendship points and relationship points with each of the other characters, allowing the player to pair together any couples, both romantic heterosexual relationships as well as friendships of their choice, allowing a form of fanfiction to exist within the game itself. This type of social system was later extended to allow romantic lesbian relationships in BioWare's 2007 sci-fi RPG Mass Effect. Persona 2 also featured dating elements, including the option to engage in a homosexual relationship. However, the relationship system in Star Ocean not only affected the storyline, but also the gameplay, affecting the way the characters behaved towards each other in battle. It featured various deviations from the standard RPG format. Battles were much more action-oriented. They took place in real time, during which the player had manual control over their character, as opposed to choosing options from a menu. In the battlefield, the player's character could move without limit, allowing them to trade blows face-to-face with the enemy or circle around for a flanking attack. The other party members, up to 3, were controlled by the game's AI. The player could change an ally's strategy to one of 6 different predetermined options, ranging from spread out and attack to save your magic points and stand still and don't do anything. A 7-volume manga series was written and illustrated by Mayumi Azuma based on the video game. Studio Dean adapted the manga series into a 26-episode anime series entitled Star Ocean X, which aired on TV Tokyo in 2001. This year saw the release of Chrono Cross, which became the 3rd game to receive a perfect score from GameSpot, after The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Soul Calibur. The game featured 2 major parallel dimensions, where the player must go back and forth between the worlds to recruit party members, obtain items and advance the plot, with events in one dimension influencing the other. Like its predecessor Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross featured a New Game Plus option and multiple endings, with at least a dozen possible endings based on the player's actions. About the battle system, Chrono Cross featured an element system that handled all magic, consumable items and character-specific abilities. Elements unleashed magic effects upon the enemy or party and had to be equipped for use, much like the materia of Final Fantasy VII. Elements could be purchased from shops or found in treasure chests littered throughout areas. Once acquired, they were allocated to a grid whose size and shape was unique to each character. Elements were divided into 6 paired oppositional types or colors, each with a natural effect. Each character and enemy had an innate color, enhancing the power of using same color elements while also making them weak against elements of the opposite color. Chrono Cross also featured a field effect, which kept track of element color used in the upper corner of the battle screen. If the field was purely one color, the power of elements of that color were enhanced, while elements of the opposite color were weakened. Another innovative aspect of Chrono Cross was its stamina bar. At the beginning of a battle, each character had 7 points of stamina. When a character attacked, stamina was decreased proportionally to the potency of the attack. It slowly recovered when the character defended or when other characters performed actions in battle. Characters with stamina below 1 point waited to take action. Use of an element reduced the user's stamina bar by 7 stamina points. This often meant that the user's stamina gauge fell into the negative and the character waited longer than usual to recover. With each battle, players could enhance statistics such as strength and defense. However, no system of experience points existed. After 4 or 5 upgrades, statistics remained static until players defeated a boss. This added a star to a running count shown on the status screen, which allowed for another few rounds of statistical increases. In most RPGs, it's your job to stop the end of the world. In Valkyrie Profile, it's your job to start it. Ragnarok, the end of the world as defined in Norse mythology, is just around the corner, and the good guys in the heavens are in desperate need of souls to fight in the resulting war against the bad guys in the underworld. There are roughly 24 characters to recruit, some fully fleshed out, others barely touched on, but their souls are not yet ready to fight for the gods. You need to train them by taking them into dungeons, building both their battle skills and their spiritual fortitude. All of these dungeons are side-scrolling stages filled with puzzles, traps, and of course numerous enemies. The battle system is strange, with actions for each of the 4 party members assigned to a face button. Each character has a number of attacks, each with unique speed and strength. Timing the button presses to create combos and juggle enemies is the key to executing impressive special attacks and overpowering foes. At the end of each chapter, you need to send off some of your warriors to the heavens, permanently removing them from your party. You're given vague hints about the requirements, but you can never be sure that you're doing it properly, especially when it could potentially leave you with an underpowered squad. Tri-Ace, creators of the Star Ocean series, has a knack for creating exciting, visceral battle systems that feel like action games, even though they're still heavily rooted in role-playing conventions. The soundtrack, provided by progressive rock legend Motoi Sakuraba, is also one of his best works, delivering both pounding, intense battle themes and dreamy melancholy ballads. In other words, it packs a punch that few RPGs can counter. Game Art's Luna series has a pretty decent following, especially amongst English speakers. This was mostly because it was one of the few JRPGs of the 16-bit era that received competent translations thanks to working designs. After the original 2 releases for the Sega CD, their remakes for the Saturn and PlayStation, and a completely negligible side story, Magical School for the Saturn and Game Gear, fans kept clamoring for a new Luna installment. What Luna fans perhaps may not have realized is that the series' spirit lived in Grandia, another series by the same company. It may be missing the interesting mythology behind the lunar world, and they definitely falter from the lack of Toshiyuki Kuboka's distinctive character artwork, but they're practically perfect on one area, the battle system. During battle, each character's turn order is depicted on a gauge at the bottom of the screen. The action unfolds in real time, similar to Final Fantasy's active time battle system, except you're made explicitly aware of your foe's places in the turn queue, allowing you to plot your strategy accordingly. The action pauses whenever one of your character's turns comes up, allowing you to make a move. In addition to the usual magic spells, each character has 2 primary attacks, a combo which consists of multiple powerful attacks, and a critical, single quick attack. There's a short delay between the time when an action is decided and when it's actually executed, indicated on the action gauge as a line of red. If you manage to hit an enemy with a critical attack during their small window, you'll stun the enemy and cause them to lose their turn. So, if you're not paying attention, the enemy can do the same to you. As a result, each time you pick a command, you have to weigh your decisions, be mindful of the speed and distance of your attacks, and take some risks at every turn. If you play it smart, it's possible to emerge from battle completely unscathed, which rewards you with additional experience and a special victory theme. During the 90s, there was an innovation shift from interface elements to gameplay and storytelling. As new, more powerful and potent consoles were released, artists, developers and sound designers were imbued with more freedom to express themselves into a unique world, reaching a climax of storytelling, solidifying Japanese role-playing video games as a multidisciplinary form of art. Concluding this video, check the previous one detailing JRPGs in the 80s if you haven't already. There is a final video planned about the decade of 2000 to 2010, so stay tuned. If you like what I do, please like, subscribe and spread the word to people you think they might find it interesting. The feedback from the previous video was very helpful, so thank you everybody. See you next time.